talkSPORT Twitter asked last night who was the best playmaker of the last 10 years. Apart from Lionel Messi, Iniesta, Modric, Kevin De Bruyne, they were all in the running. MEZUT Ozil won by a whopping 71% of the votes.
Ridiculous.
And there were over 80,000 votes as well.
Can't believe that.
What about that? No, you're not having it?
No, I'm not having that at all.
No?
Absolutely
Why?
not. He wouldn't even... he wouldn't get in my top 20 Premier League players.
Of all time?
Of all time, nowhere near
Not even
it.
at his peak?
Nowhere near it. No, listen, he was a fantastic
Not even
player.
when he was playing with Sanchez?
He said no, Laura. Let it go.
No, let it go. Let it go. I know you're an Arsenal fan. No, listen. I think he's had a fantastic career, you know, and he was a maverick, brilliant on the ball, made things happen. His assists when he was in his prime were very good, but I just think he's left a poor legacy on his Arsenal career with the way he's been, and you know the money that he was on. He never really turned up in the massive games for me. You know, he didn't take Arsenal to another level with his performances.
You don't think he did?
No, I thought he was good. Like, I thought he was very good. But, when I think of Arsenal, I don't think of, MEZUT Ozil. I think of Thierry Henry, Bergkamp, them types of players.
What about
what
about if you're going before the Premier League? What about when he's playing with Ronaldo and Ronaldo saying he's the best player he's played alongside?
For Real Madrid?
Yeah, what about then?
Yeah, I remember watching him for Real Madrid and thinking he's a class act. I'm not getting away from the fact that he's not a class act. I just don't think he was. I don't think he was when he turned up in big games. I just never really thought he was amazingly great. And then when he wasn't playing for Arsenal, and I said this before, he actually become a better player not playing, because when Arsenal started struggling, not doing very well, having a bit of a bad time, everyone's going, oh, we need to get MEZUT Ozil back. But really and truthfully, when he played, and Arteta did give him opportunities to play, he didn't produce. He wasn't great. He didn't work hard enough for the team. He was a bit of a maverick, but I wouldn't say he was brilliant. I wouldn't say he was someone I'd go, top 10 player in Premier League history. On
consistency, though, you sort of saying, like, if he was consistent at his best, would you put him up there?
No.
Simon, MEZUT Ozil, I'm afraid we have to. He's pitched up in Turkey and he's signing for Fenerbahce.
Yep.
He arrives there bedecked in the Fenerbahce scarf, flag,
yep.
The lot. It's all moved on. How are you going to look back on Ozil's time at Arsenal? What is your honest take on what this boy has done and how he's left?
Look, I think you look at it from a variety of positions. First of all, he's a very good player. Obviously, he's technically a very good player, but I was always curious to see why he was considered not good enough for Real Madrid, and Arsenal were chasing the same sort of places and spaces that Real Madrid were chasing in the Champions League. And I looked at it, I was underwhelmed by the transfer in the first place. It was billed in a certain way, and they spent a lot of money. Then you move into the second phase of his involvement of Arsenal, which is the contract that Arsene Wenger gave him, or the board gave him, and Arsene Wenger probably rubber-stamped on behalf of the board, which was an obscene amount of money for a player.
Yeah.
£350,000 a week or whatever he gets. Right? That's one thing, but then you move into the territory of his performances to be worth that kind of money. And for some time, I remember watching him in 2017 under Sam's tenure,
yes.
who we'll talk about later on at Crystal Palace, when they were shocking at Selhurst Park. And one of the main culprits of their shocking midfield performance was MEZUT Ozil and his lack of desire to want to run for his team. I look at what's happened there, and I can't understand the narrative that gets peddled out about there's something behind the scenes. There's something more than MEZUT Ozil simply not fitting into the team. There's something more. And you look at it and say, Unai Emery didn't fancy him. Mikel Arteta didn't fancy him. The club have continued to pay his £350,000 a week, occupying or taking up 18 million pounds a year of their wage bill on a player. And the only possible outcome has to be that the player will not come round to the way of thinking of two different managers. And in the end, if you keep on having the same circumstances replicate themselves with different managers, it has to be the player. People keep saying there's a conspiracy theory. There's something more than MEZUT Ozil not being good enough for that team. And I don't think there is. I don't think MEZUT Ozil wanted to knuckle down and acknowledge the fact that the Arsenal side that he came to sign for was going through a change. Wenger's time was coming to an end. His effectiveness was coming to an end.
Yeah.
Arsenal's last vestiges of the team that resembled something that was really good was beginning to wind down, and they needed to change. The culture needed to change. And what you needed to have was players that were prepared to embrace it. He got his contract. The mistake was to understand the culture of the individual whilst the culture of the club was changing. They gave him £350,000 a week. He wasn't worth it from the outset, and he was never worth it going forward because he was never going to fit into what Arsenal needed. So the notion that he sat there and simply being prepared to draw his money, yet create a smokescreen that somehow it's everybody else but him. It was him. The reasons why he wasn't picked by Unai Emery and was marginalised by Unai Emery was because of him, not some agenda from the board, because the board's agenda would be to get rid of the 350 grand a week.
Absolutely.
Not to have it being paid and him not being played.
But I think you're spot on, Simon.
Then Arteta comes in and does the same thing.
Yeah.
And why? Because Ozil won't do... And it's no great... It's a huge indication of where he is in world football, because the only two teams that wanted him were DC United and Fenerbahce.
Yeah. It says everything. And I think you're so right. I mean, the timing of it, Danny, is the thing that I think Arsenal fans will always look back on. I mean, it's reported this morning, Arsene Wenger, quotes, hugely resented the handling of Ozil's contract situation before he left the club. You can imagine he would stomp about a bit saying, no, don't do it, don't do it.
What I would like to hear more is a little bit more honesty from the managers, because the managers, you know, they've sat there and Ozil's made certain statements and, you know, been a little bit surreptitious behind the scenes with silly little tweets and observations. I'd much prefer one of the managers to come out and say he simply was lazy, wasn't working hard enough, wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. The reason why Ozil was not in this side is because ultimately he doesn't do what I want him to do on the training ground. He doesn't do what I want him to do, full stop. It's not good enough. I expect more, and he won't play for the side until I do. Now, you could turn around and say, well, he did that by definition, by taking him out of the squad. The challenge for me is that Danny's absolutely right. If someone's stupid enough to give a player, they don't understand their motivations, a contract of that level, then they reap the whirlwind. But that that's a very easy way to say it gives an excuse to a player. What about the player's standards? What about their obligation and their responsibility? Because it gives players a certain perspective in people's minds. You should want to be at the top of your game. You should want to be worth the money you're being paid.
Yes.
Okay, let me give you a hypothetical scenario. Can you imagine him playing for someone like Mourinho, and Mourinho allowing that to go on? Mourinho would have been on the front foot, called him out in the same way that he's called out Ndombele, called out Luke Shaw. You can't attribute Luke Shaw's progress over the last 3 years entirely to the beratings that Mourinho gave him, but they certainly concentrated his mind, and then Ndombele the same. You want to see these players being slightly put in their place a little bit and being made to be, you know, responsible for the obligations that they had. So I understand your point of view, but it also comes down to the management, because the board was, if it was an agenda behind the scenes because he's on this amount of money, well, it's a hell of an agenda because he's continued to get this money without being paid.
Is something that is a huge boost for the Turkish Super League. I don't think you can see it any other way, because you know, people will be simply delighted to have him there. I mean, as football supporters, we're all united by hope, and hope in the most hopeless situations sometimes. And this seemed a transfer even a couple of weeks ago that seemed utterly impossible on a financial level. Knowing what he earned at Arsenal, even if Arsenal decided to pay up or pay some of the wages, it still seemed very unlikely that Fenerbahce could afford this. Now, of course, because they're obliged to announce such a large transaction to the Turkish Stock Exchange, we'll know more about the accurate numbers in the next couple of days once the deal's actually done. I suspect, as deals are often done with very big stars, a lot of it will be heavily weighted to performance and bonus based, much as was the case with Galatasaray when they did quite unsustainable deals for Didier Drogba and Wesley Sneijder going back a few years. I'm shocked that it's happened. I think it could be exciting, of course. There's no doubt on a sporting level, Özil has to go and win the title with Fenerbahce this season, because they've got a game in hand. They're 3 points off Besiktas, who beat Galatasaray 2-0 today, which we'll talk about a little bit later, off the top. So they could theoretically go back on top, or at least joint top, tomorrow night. But having said that, this is such a huge financial deal, and Turkish football is in such a hole at the moment that it's going to be really tough, I think, to justify this. It'll be interesting to see how long it lasts, but Turkish football has been here before.
Chris, 10 seconds, 15 seconds on this?
Yeah, I mean, Fenerbahce, huge club, last won the title in 2014. Now, MEZUT Özil hasn't played since March, so his fitness to go straight in and play week in, week out will be interesting. But if he can go there and for the first time in 7 years lead Fenerbahce to the league, he'll get a huge welcome. And already for the league and for the product, the Turkish Super League, it's an outstanding piece of business bringing him there.
You're an Arsenal fan?
No, I mean,
top 10 of all time?
He wouldn't get in my top 10. And I'd struggle to potentially put him in my top 20.
What's the reasons for it, though?
Just because...
What's gone wrong with Özil?
Did he play within himself? Was there always a sense that he was almost playing with a handbrake on?
Was the Premier League not for him?
I don't even know if it was not for him, because I think...
But, the stats Crookie's just said there are very good.
Are very good. But, I mean, you look at obviously the way he played, and he wasn't very laid back, and maybe that went against him, because you can have that demeanour like you're not trying. He probably is trying, but he looked that way. But I don't agree with the argument when people say he doesn't work hard, or he's not working for the team, he's not running, because when they bought him, you didn't buy him to track back and do that. You bought him because of his offensive capabilities, unlocking doors, making things happen. And I still believe in this current Arsenal squad, if he was still there, he's the guy I trust more than anyone to make the right decision, the right pass, the quality of pass. But for whatever reason, it just turned really, really sour. Now, how would I remember him at Arsenal? Most definitely, I remember him as someone who underachieved, because with the ability that he's got and his CV, how good he was for Germany before, obviously, all that controversy happened, when he was at Real Madrid and then he came to Arsenal, some of the performances that he put in, I remember thinking, wow, like, he was similar in terms, and I agree with Theo, Fabregas, how we can just, get the ball down and put it on a sixpence for the striker to get in, or the wide man. So I'd hold him in that regard. But the difference between him and someone like a Fabregas is that Fabregas turned up in them big games. There were times when Arsenal really needed Fabregas, and he put the performances in. And I don't think we can say that for Özil.
No, I don't. You know what it is? I don't think he changed his game.
No.
And I think it's the managers that changed their opinions of him. So Arsene Wenger obviously played his best football under him. Seemed like they had a really, really good relationship. Arsene Wenger knew exactly what he was like. He never changed his game.
No.
It's just teams evolved, and maybe, I mean, he had a tongue-in-cheek tweet the other day saying Emil Smith-Rowe's done fantastically well, and they can you can play with a modern number 10. So is he trying to say something there that maybe managers just didn't want to play with a number 10 and build a team around him? But for me, I agree with you, Daz. To not get in the 25 best players for Arsenal this season is ludicrous.
Do you know what as well, though? Is I think they had enough players, Arsenal, that if you were talking about work rate and what's off the ball and defensive kind of responsibilities, if you know that's not in his nature, I would have built then a midfield around him. I would have played Partey, I would have played El Nene, or just to do that kind of...
People lead in different ways.
Exactly, let them do the defensive stuff.
He gets the ball in tight areas. He plays passes that no one else can play.
I would rather him be more further up, and then you have Partey and El Nene, whoever you want to play, doing all these kind of donkey work, as you want to call it, and let him go and do what you brought him to the club for, which is to create opportunities and make us play on the front foot. So I hope, Crookie, that it does come up why Arteta never ever wanted to use him, especially you said he ain't played for 10 months.
I mean, you're a centre forward. You're a centre forward who likes to make runs. Aubameyang is obviously a perfect example of that as well. So you look behind you when someone gets the ball, and Thomas Partey or El Nene, as we said, or Ceballos. Are you making that run, or would you as a centre forward prefer someone to turn around and Özil's got the ball, and you think I can make this run because he's going to find me?
Well, and obviously when I played with you, it was one of them where if certain other members of the team got the ball, I'd come to feet because I think, well, the ball's not coming. But for you try it, and I knew it was coming with quality. So then you go, right, as soon as you get the ball, right, I'm off. And I think you're right. When you've got people like El Nene and Partey, and they're both good players, neat and tidy, but they're not going to play that killer pass.
Match winners.
They're not match winners.
No.
Do you know what I mean? They're not going to try things that might be the difference. And I think you're right. Aubameyang, Lacazette, people like that have kind of suffered from that.
It's strange, Crookie. I mean, you'll say when players don't play, they seem to become better, but it's not happening in this scenario. He still you talk about Özil and you get replies saying that he's not good enough, he's lazy, and this is from Arsenal fans. So that old age when you say they're not playing, they become a better player, you want him back in the team. It's still not the case with Özil. So he must have not been playing well for a very, very long time.